Davis, and without objection, these are all entered into the record. And Senator Welch, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rice, it was very nice to visit with you yesterday, and it's nice to see your kids. You promised they were going to be here, and your wife, a couple of your kids. That's great. All of us are kind of amazed you're the cheerful person you are, having survived working for this guy named Cruz from Texas. I'll tell you, it's hard on us, but we can imagine what it's like for the chief of staff. You know, this is
Your time has expired.
You know, to all of you, let me express what is a concern I think many of us have. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing, but there's a profoundly new set of expectations and boundaries in what the executive power is now. We've had decisions by the Supreme Court that gives immunity to the president. I find that shocking. I think a president has to be subject to the law, not above the law. We also have a president who's been very explicit in determined in his insistence that it's, quote, my Justice Department. And has also made the statement that if he does it to save the country, it's lawful. That's unique, that we haven't had that point of view embedded, and to some extent, there's some validation with what the Supreme Court is doing and also what the president is asserting. That causes me great concern because I think it really threatens the separation of powers and the co-equal authority of Congress to be a check and balance. And all of you will have major positions that will require you basically to serve the interests of the president. And we all understand that, but where there's a real redefinition of that presidential authority. So I want to ask a little bit about that. I'll ask you, Mr. Rice, you know, I know your tweet was, you were asked about that, can the president basically violate the law? Just tell me where you come from in terms of what the limits are on presidential authority.
Well, thank you, and it was really a pleasure visiting with you and your staff just yesterday. Senator, if I could just clarify, you referenced a tweet in which I said the president has unlimited power?
I'll get to the tweet. I thought Senator Durbin had displayed it. I was told that. You got it? Looking for some Andrew Jackson level leadership on this one. Judge Yackel has made his decision, now let him enforce it. So it's the famous Jackson dictum that we can essentially disregard the decision of a Supreme Court.
Thank you for that, and thank you for clarifying, Senator Welch. So my position reflects a fairly mainstream view within right of center jurisprudential circles, which is simply to suggest that various Supreme Court or Court of Appeals decisions are more limited in scope than maybe our friends who share a different jurisprudential view of Supreme Court holding would suggest.
Well, let's say there is a Supreme Court holding saying that a presidential policy is invalid. You know, but President Trump has said he can do basically anything if it's to save the country. All right, that's his motivation. And that anything would include disregarding the order of the court if in the judgment of the president, his disregarding that order was to save the country.
So, Senator, first, I think I'm not aware of any instance in which President Trump genuinely stated that he can do anything to save the country.
Mr. Sauer, well, I'm asking that maybe it's a hypothetical, but I actually don't think this is a hypothetical in that it hasn't happened yet, but it's a hypothetical based on very explicit decisions, one by the Supreme Court on immunity, another by President Trump's own statements. Mr. Sauer, do you believe the president has the authority in the name of saving the country to disregard a decision by the Supreme Court?
To be clear, I think as I stated earlier, Senator, I have had the privilege of representing President Trump for much of the last 2 years.
I'm not asking that. You know what I'm asking.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm not asking about the privilege you had of serving the president. I'm asking the question, you heard my question. Can the president disregard the order? Because in his opinion, he's acting in a way that will, quote, save the country.
I think the answer that I was trying to give respectfully is that I've represented President Trump for 2 years, and I've never seen anything that would lead me to believe that I'd be put in any situation.
You know what? I get it. You respect him, you like him, he was your lawyer. But I'm not asking about that. I give you that, right. But the president has now asserted that he has the right basically to do what he thinks is necessary to save the country. And I'm asking whether that includes violating a Supreme Court order.
I think I would just refer back to the answers I gave earlier to similar questions from the ranking member.
Well, how about answering my question now that I'm here?
Well, there was a lengthy exchange about that, but again, I've represented President Trump for 2 years. I've never been put in any situation like that, and I don't
No,
anticipate being so.
I just got to say, Mr. Chairman, that's a little bit frustrating. I understand that he has a good relationship with the president, respects him, all right? And the president has never put him in that position. But we're in a new situation here. The president is now the president. He's made these statements. There is a real question in emerging unitary executive authority. This is a very serious question that we've never had to face before. Can the president disregard a decision by the Supreme Court? And, you know, I'll yield back, but I want to just express my frustration at not getting a direct answer on what I think is an existential question for this country.
Well, I will note the witnesses did point out that President Trump has been president for 4 years and 1 month now, and he has never disregarded a court order. And we just finished 4 years of Joe Biden routinely disregarding the law, in no instance more flagrantly than concerning our southern border, where he defied federal immigration law and allowed 12 million illegal immigrants to come into this country. And so the hypotheticals that are being posed by our Democrat colleagues, sadly, we have lived in the last 4 years when you have a lawless president who does not follow the statutes passed by Congress and signed into the United States Code. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The credentials of each of you are impressive.
Nomination. You want to speak on this? Yeah, go ahead and speak.
Mr. Chairman, Aaron Wrights has demonstrated he is not fit to serve in any role in the Department of Justice. He believes there are instances in which a public official may defy a court order that should concern every member of this committee on both sides of the table. As Senator Kennedy said to Mr. Wrights during his hearing, quote, "Don't ever, ever take the position you're not going to follow the order of a federal court, ever," close quote. I couldn't agree more. Failing to unequivocally commit to following federal court orders should disqualify any nominee before this committee. This is not only my concern. Mr. Wrights attempted to hide his disturbing views on many issues, deleting approximately 4,000 social media posts. Nothing was off limits in his social media posts that we uncovered. The venom and self-righteousness in his posts are fair warning of what he would bring to the Department of Justice. There was one episode involving the Olympic gymnast Simone Biles. I am not going to go into it because he publicly apologized for what he said, but there are other things of concern. I will only speak of one. Before Derek Chauvin was convicted of murdering George Floyd, Mr. Wrights wrote, and I quote, "No question in my mind," he wrote, "that Chauvin is not guilty." Really? Did he see the 9 minutes and 29-second video of Chauvin kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck as he cried out for his mother? Can you ever forget the look in his eyes? Several Republican members of this committee rightfully spoke out against this heinous crime. After Chauvin was convicted, Mr. Wrights called the jury decision, quote, "a bogus guilty verdict," close quote. Mr. Wrights' disrespect for the finality of court orders is matched by his disrespect for the finality of a jury verdict. He's unfit to lead the Office of Legal Policy, and I urge my colleagues to oppose him.
Mr. Chairman.
Who's calling?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, go ahead, Senator Cruz.
If I could briefly respond, I will say it is rich listening to our Democrat colleagues profess their fidelity to the rule of law after 4 years of happily turning a blind eye to Joe Biden and the Biden Justice Department ignoring federal law, refusing to force federal immigration law, blatantly defying the law. And ironically, the litany of false charges that the senator from Illinois just directed at Mr. Wrights is really striking, but their favorite talking point is that he will defy federal court orders. Now, he's been a practicing lawyer for many years. He's never defied a federal court order, but I'll tell you who has. Joe Biden. And in fact, let's read what Joe Biden said in his tweet. Here's what Joe Biden said, quote, "The Supreme Court tried to block me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me. I've relieved student debt for over 5 million Americans. I'm going to keep going." That's the same Joe Biden they were happy to salute and listen to defy the court if it's in favor of their left-wing political agenda. I will point out the aspersions Ranking Member Durbin just cast to Mr. Wrights. He is also in the Marines as a reserve, a major in the Marines. He has fought to defend this nation, and he will make an exemplary Assistant Attorney General at the Department of Justice. And I, for one, am glad we are getting officials at the Department of Justice who will follow the damn law instead of being lawless and treating the Department of Justice and FBI as the personal enforcement arm of the Democrat National Committee. I urge everyone to vote yes, although I'm confident everyone on the left side of the aisle is going to vote no, because for all their words of the rule of law, they could not bring themselves once to demand the rule of law be followed from the Biden Justice Department.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Graham.
Aye.
Mr. Cornyn.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz. Aye. Mr. Hawley. Aye. Mr. Tillis.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Mrs. Blackburn. Aye. Mr. Schmidt. Aye. Mrs. Britt. Aye. Mrs. Moody. Aye. Mr. Durbin.
No.
Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar.
No.
Mr. Coons.
No by proxy?
Mr. Blumenthal.
No.
Ms. Hirono. No. Mr. Booker.
No by proxy?
Mr. Padilla.
No.
Mr. Welch.
No.
Mr. Schiff.
No.
Chairman Grassley.
Aye.
On this vote, the ayes are 12, the nays are 10.
The nomination will be favorably reported. The committee is adjourned.
Mr. Chairman.
He is. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start by taking a moment to set the record straight on the motion to authorize a subpoena to the Massachusetts Port Authority. This subpoena motion is a fishing expedition into the Massachusetts government. It is unfair, unnecessary, and unprecedented, and it leads this committee down a very dangerous path. First, let's be clear. There are no migrants sheltering at Logan Airport, none. And there have been none since July of 2024, 8 months ago. This issue is resolved and over. Second, congressional committees, including this committee, have historically authorized subpoenas as a last resort, only after repeatedly attempting and failing to obtain voluntary compliance with a party. While I understand that Massport did not respond to the chairman's letters last year, before he was chairman, they have since agreed to voluntarily respond to his written questions by March 10th, 5 days from now. And yet we're still wasting time and resources with today's markup. And finally, this subpoena authorization is extraordinarily broad, requiring Massport to turn over documents and communications involving numerous public and private entities in Massachusetts. Yet the chairman first requested these documents and communications just last week. In other words, we are wasting time and resources litigating an issue that is already resolved with a cooperating party on a request for documents first made just 10 days ago. This is no way to conduct a congressional investigation. And at the same time, this committee is ignoring critical issues that are within our jurisdiction. Let's take aviation safety. On Thursday of last week, you can hold that up, please hold it up higher. Elon Musk tweeted, here's what he said last Thursday: To be clear here, the Verizon communication system to air traffic control is breaking down very rapidly. The FAA assessment is single digits months to catastrophic failure, putting air traveler safety at serious risk. The Starlink terminals are being sent at no cost to the taxpayer on an emergency basis to restore air traffic connectivity. The situation is extremely dire. Extremely dire. Air traffic safety. Hair on fire from Elon Musk inside of the computer system, getting all the information he needs. That's what he's saying to our community. We could have another accident. It's dire. Instead, we're talking about a cooperating entity that is willing to cooperate with the committee on information requested only 10 days ago. This is 5 days ago. This is 6 days ago. This is from Elon Musk. He's saying we could have an air tragedy. We could be losing hundreds of people in an air tragedy. The situation is dire. Where's the subpoena to Elon Musk? Where's the subpoena to the acting head of the FAA? Where's that hearing? That's what we should be having right now. Let's put that information out. Let's do whatever we can do as the committee of oversight to ensure that the resources are there, that this is corrected. So if ever there was missing a forest for the trees, this is what we're doing in the committee here today. And so we've got the Cassandra-like warning. It's about as scary a message as I have ever heard. People are getting increasingly afraid to travel on planes, and the guy in charge of the oversight is saying that they should be afraid. Is that the message the Commerce Committee wants to be sending to the American public, that they should be afraid to fly, that conditions are dire, that it could be catastrophic? Instead, we're talking about something that ended last July and that the entity is willing to cooperate. I don't think that's a good use of our time. I don't think that's a good use of our time. Let's have that hearing. That's why I sent a letter to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member on Monday of this week, requesting that Elon Musk appear, requesting that I will have an amendment. Yes, I will. I will have an amendment. But that, to me, is what this issue is all about. And at this point, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Senator Markey, are you?
Well, I'd like to first
Yes.
make amendment number one, Markey number one, yes. If the amendment could be called up, I'd like to call up amendment number one to the Massport subpoena.
Please proceed.
Okay. This amendment narrows the scope of any subpoena to Massport to the written questions that the then ranking member asked Massport last year. As currently drafted, the subpoena authorization is breathtakingly broad. It would give the chairman sweeping unilateral authority to demand documents and communications involving numerous public and private entities in Massachusetts. In fact, the chairman first made the request for these documents and communications last week. Let's review the timeline. In March of 2024, then ranking member Cruz sent a letter seeking written answers to questions to Massport. It wasn't until Monday of last week, just 10 days ago, that the now chairman substantially expanded that request in a subpoena schedule provided to Massport. In that schedule, the chairman stated his intent to seek a vast amount of documents and communications from Massport related to migrants sleeping at Logan Airport. And he requested those documents dating back to January 1st of 2021, years before the incident that the chairman is purportedly investigating even occurred. This isn't the good governance investigation that the committee has historically been known for. This is a fishing expedition. And I understand that the chairman is frustrated that Massport did not respond to his questions last year, but the motion as drafted is not limited to those questions. Markey Amendment number 1 would fix that by limiting the scope of the subpoena to those written questions in the chairman's March of 2024 letter. And I firmly believe that even with my amendment, that this subpoena authorization is unnecessary and a waste of this committee's time and resources. And as I said, there are many more important issues that we should be debating in this committee as we're sitting here right now. But at the very least, the committee should not be authorizing its chairman, no matter who that person is, to demand communications and documents from a state entity that it requested for the first time just 10 days ago. So I just would ask my colleagues, in fairness, to not just Massachusetts, but to any state, to not allow any committee to say that after 10 days that there can be a subpoena issued by a congressional committee. It's just not fair. It should be limited just to the request which the chairman made last year, and I ask for support on my motion.
Well, I appreciate Senator Markey's remarks in support of aviation safety, and aviation safety is most certainly a priority of all members of this committee on both the Republican and Democrat side. I will note Senator Markey made a reference in his remarks. He said that there have been no more illegal aliens housed at Logan Airport since July of 2024. That remark is in error, and I'm going to read from a Boston Globe article dated September 17th, 2024, substantially after July of 2024. The headline is, "Migrant Families Return to Logan, Raising Questions About State Shelter Restrictions." On Monday night, about a dozen Haitian migrants slept in Terminal A. And without objection, I'm going to enter this article into the record. The senator from Massachusetts spoke passionately about concerns for aviation safety, and yet as we sit here, this committee does not know the answer to a great many questions about the longstanding practice of Logan and the Biden administration of housing hundreds, perhaps thousands of illegal aliens in airports meant for the traveling public. How many security incidents occurred with illegal aliens being placed in airports? How many women were assaulted by illegal aliens housed in public airports? How many children were assaulted by illegal aliens housed at Logan Airport? How many of the illegal immigrants housed at Logan Airport had criminal convictions? How many had convictions for homicide? How many had convictions for rape? How many had convictions for child molestation? How many were members of violent gangs that have now been designated as foreign terrorist organizations? Of the illegal immigrants that were housed in airports, how many of them had weapons? How many of them had weapons within the security perimeter? How many of those illegal aliens attempted to access secure areas of the airport, such as the tarmac or other places that are designed to keep the traveling public safe? In response to that, the senator from Massachusetts has no answers because none of us have answers. Because Massport will not answer those questions, and what they are fighting tooth and nail against is actually producing the documents that have been requested. The senator from Massachusetts suggested that those documents were just requested 10 days ago. That is not correct. The March letter was not the only correspondence with Massport. On August 9th, 2024, which is a lot more than 10 days ago, I sent a subsequent letter detailing the documents they were to preserve and explicitly stating that preservation was so they could be subject to compulsory process. Massport could have avoided this hearing today by doing what Bonterra did and doing what Newpoint did. This is not a secret. They knew how to avoid the subpoena. They could comply. 2 of the 3 who were noticed did that. Massport did not, which to me raises the inference that those documents, the answers to the questions I just laid out, are even worse than we might be imagining. If they are not, Massport could provide those documents Senator Markey's amendment would take away this committee's ability to get those documents and answer those questions. And so I would urge members to vote no on Senator Markey's amendment.
Mr. Chairman, okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Markey.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have your letter from August 9th of 2024, which you just made reference. And just so it's very clear, that letter that you sent to Massport on August 9th of 2024 did in fact ask for a preservation of documents, but it never asked them to be provided to you. You did not make that request. You did not make that request. So it's inaccurate to claim that you ever sent Massport a letter asking them to provide you documents. You never did that. A document preservation letter is not the same thing as a document request letter. They're two separate things. So just to make it clear, if you want to make that motion to request those documents, make it. Have this committee deal with that issue. But you have never asked for it. And it's unfair to ask Massport or any regional airport authority to be asked to now pay a penalty for something that they were never asked to do. It's just not right. It's not fair. So just to me, and again, I ask that your letter be included in the record.
Without objection.
So that it's very clear that you never asked for the documents or any communications. You're now seeking communications as well, was never made in this letter.
So I would note, if the burden is somehow unfair or unreasonable, somehow JFK managed to comply, somehow O'Hare managed to comply, somehow Bonterra managed to comply, somehow Newpoint managed to comply. The only entity that is refusing to comply is Massport. And in the August 9th letter, I will read what it says explicitly, quote, "If you refuse to answer a question or produce documents, state so specifically and provide the reason for your refusal. In similar circumstances, failure to answer such congressional inquiries has resulted in Congress compelling parties to respond." Massport has understood that compulsory process was on the table at least since August 9th of 2024. Senator Cantwell, did you have additional comments?
Yes.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, if we limit it just to August 9th, which is what my amendment does, then I think you're within the purview of this committee's, I think, responsible use of its power. But you never made a request to provide you any documents that or communications from the Port Authority. So I just think it's unfair. There's no due process here. This is just a violation of fundamental due process for Massport or for any subject of any subpoena that will ever come from this committee. Okay. You made the request. You made the request last Monday for these documents for the communication. It is unfair then to say that you 10 days later are going to issue a subpoena. And by the way, notice this within the same week that you made the request. It's just unfair because the request is comprehensive. It is very broad. It's a fishing expedition. And there should be given to Massport or any entity ever subpoenaed by this committee a reasonable amount of time in order to respond.
Apparently, the senator from Massachusetts believes it is a fishing expedition to want to know if violent criminal illegal aliens threatened or actually committed acts of violence against the traveling public. That strikes me as right at the heart of this committee's responsibility. I would note the senator has already had 15 minutes arguing for this amendment, and we have issues with maintaining a quorum. So does Senator Cantwell have any comments on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could. And I appreciate Senator Markey offering his amendment and particularly the clarity of that last point, which is, you know, Mr. Chairman, you brought up several times these other issues, these other subpoenas, these other activities, which aren't really related to airports at all. So comparing apples and oranges and saying the process and the compliance is had no problems, I mean, it makes no sense. And I think what people are looking for here is a standard and a mark by consistency having been on the committee for many years and seeing many subpoena operations and opportunities, people are always trying to crystallize what exactly is it that people are after, what information. So when I think the senator from Massachusetts is making a point that when you send a letter that basically asked a whole variety of questions from your staff, basically sending a letter last year asking for lots of questions to be answered, is different than actual subpoena documentation. Yeah, we know this well from our committee, from a couple of different aviation safety cases, that being specific about what documents you're actually requesting and the chairman actually requesting those are a very different answer than sending emails to a company saying, please answer 45 different questions. And so we're trying to be crisp here in what legal process we're really going to ask for and vote on. But now that you've asked for that documentation, they are saying, we're going to give it to you in 5 days, by next Monday. So I just want to clarify on the underlying point, Mr. Chairman, there are no migrants. This is an issue that stopped last July. Yes, you brought up an article. My sense is that Logan Airport is quickly responding to that. These are not people that were in a non-secure area of the airport. They were not on the other side of TSA. They were not wandering around about to get on flights and
Does Senator Cantwell know that, and how do you know that? I
that
don't.
is our communication from the airport and other airports.
Would the gentlelady yield, please?
Yes.
This is a
Senator
letter from Massport to the committee. It comes from Richard Davey, the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Massport. Here's what he says. Thank you for your response. I also wanted to make clear that Massport will respond to the questions already presented on or before March 10th of 2025 and respectfully ask the committee to forego issuing subpoenas until you have seen our complete response. March 10th is Monday coming up. So can we at least wait until we see what they've voluntarily sent you before we begin to have a process here of subpoenaing additional information? That would be just the minimal request I would make, just a postponement until next week of this.
So I would say
deliberation.
two things in response. Number one, this was not one single question or one single email. Rather, this was two separate, detailed, formal letters on letterhead as the ranking member of this committee, specifying precisely the documents that were sought and the questions that were sought. And in between, there were 9 separate communications. Massport stood as an outlier. Everyone else subject to this oversight complied. Massport believed it is not subject to this committee's jurisdiction. That belief is in error. And I would note, Senator Cantwell said a minute ago, well, now Massport is going to comply. No, they are not. They are saying they will answer the questions, but they are adamantly refusing to hand over the documents. The documents that have been requested, they are not handing over. And I'll note finally, this vote is not to issue the subpoena, but rather an authorization to issue the subpoena. If Massport wants to avoid the issuance of a subpoena, it has a very easy path forward, which is it can provide the documents that will answer the questions about how federal funds were misused and how and to what extent the flying public was endangered because of the political agenda that was being imposed on the airport. And with that, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Thune?
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again, Mr. Roth. Along with the $42.5 billion that Congress provided for the broadband program known as BEAD, we also provided nearly $3 billion to help ensure all Americans have the skills and the knowledge to participate in the online world. Those funds are critical to ensure that all Americans can benefit from the digital revolution. In Massachusetts, for example, residents expressed difficulties finding jobs online and obtaining other important services. This funding will help close those gaps. Ms. Roth, if confirmed, will you commit to fulfilling NTIA's legal obligation to provide the money authorized and appropriated by Congress for this program?
Senator, I will always abide by the law. And also, thank you so much for meeting with me in your office. It was such an honor to meet with someone who has had such an influence on on my career with so many pieces of legislation that you authored in the telecom sector. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm glad to help to provide employment for you and so many others at the Federal Communications Commission over the years. And thank you for that. I'm glad to hear that. Many of my colleagues have raised the Trump administration's ongoing review of the BEAD program and the impact of any potential changes of the program. Massachusetts has been allocated $147 million in BEAD funding and began accepting applications from providers in January. Just yesterday, Arkansas announced results from their second round of their application process. Other states are in a similar position. Given the Commerce Department's review, should states just stop accepting applications and indefinitely pause their program and just save the money?
Thank you, Senator. As haven't been confirmed yet, I haven't had a chance to confer with NTIA's career staff, and I haven't been involved in the review process. I would hope that any review conducted by NTIA is expeditious with the goal of expediting build-out.
Yeah, well, will you commit to a quick timeline for when the review will be complete?
As I haven't been confirmed, I'm not in a position to commit to a specific timeline, but I will commit that my goal would be a very expeditious timeline.
Okay, that's great, because I am very worried that changes to the program will cause serious delays in deploying broadband right as states are ready to get shovels in the ground. So now I'd like to talk about a specific change that the Trump administration appears to be pushing for BEAD, turning the program into a subsidy for Elon Musk's Starlink. Under the guise of making the program, quote, technology neutral, the Trump administration may eliminate the program's preference for fiber and make satellite providers like Starlink eligible for BEAD funding in all circumstances. Ms. Roth, do you support that change?
Senator, as I've said before, I would administer the law consistent with the statute and to the benefit of the American people, not for any specific individual or company. I do believe that Congress wrote the law in a technology-neutral manner, and that means an all-of-the-above solution that recognizes different realities across different parts of the country.
But let's be clear. Let's be clear. The BEAD program never excluded satellite broadband, but it did limit it. It did limit it to areas where fiber was excessively expensive. That is in the law. And that's because while satellite broadband may be cheaper to deploy in some locations in the short term, it costs far more to service and maintain in the long run. So, Ms. Roth, do you agree that fiber is a cheaper technology in the long run?
Senator, I would want to confer with NTIA's career staff before assessing a specific product or technology. And I look forward to working with you to ensure that Massachusetts gets what it needs.
It's not just Massachusetts, it's the whole country.
Absolutely.
Because this satellite versus fiber question is very central. And according to a Bloomberg article yesterday, for example, one state official found that fiber would save households $15,600 over a 30-year period. And I asked that article be included in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
So, Mr. Roth, I strongly urge you to oppose this giveaway to Elon Musk and ensure that the BEAD program delivers for all Americans and that we not adopt a more costly approach because that surely will drain the funding that could have been used more efficiently. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank the senator from Massachusetts, and I would note that in 4 years, the Biden administration managed to connect 0 households with the $42 billion that Congress gave them. And one of the reasons was the Biden administration, I think, engaged in petulant and partisan politics by blacklisting Elon Musk and Starlink, which is technology that could have connected particularly households in distant rural places. And I think it was purely partisan, and I would note we saw this underscored just last week when 2 American astronauts finally came back from the International Space Station, when SpaceX flew them back, and Elon offered months ago to fly them back. And because the Biden administration suffered from Elon derangement syndrome, they stranded our astronauts in space for many months rather than accept the only ride back that could bring them from the station.
If the Senator would yield?
Sure,
I
sure.
thank you. So, to the extent to which the Biden administration did authorize last July to contract with SpaceX in order to complete that mission, I think we should note that it began in the Biden administration. And to the extent to which, if we do move forward now with deployment of the BEAD program, all I'm asking is, if that be the case, that we just do it in the most efficient way. That's something that Elon would want.
Yeah. On that, we are agreed.
And if it's clear that it's fiber and not Starlink, that be the approach which is taken by the administration. Because if we do it that way, we'll save more money for the consumers over time. Looking forward. Let's look forward. Let's look to the future and our opportunities.
You know I'm a
solve the
pushover when you
problems
do
of
your
today.
JFK impression.
Today. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Roth. Appreciate the time you spent carved out for us in the office.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Cruz.
It's long been said that hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. I have to admit I'm enjoying listening to my Democrat colleagues suddenly discover the virtues of the rule of law after 4 years where they brazenly supported the most lawless Department of Justice and the most politically weaponized Department of Justice our nation has ever seen. We just heard the senator from Rhode Island talk about the imperative of protecting judges. And yet not a single Democrat senator cared about the violent protesters that showed up outside Supreme Court justices' homes, including, I might note, female justices like Justice Amy Coney Barrett, threatening their family, and Joe Biden's attorney general didn't do a damn thing and refused to enforce the law to protect those judges. Why? Because he agreed with the violent protesters and he wanted to intimidate and threaten those judges. Professor Bray, under our Constitution, who should decide elections, the voters or unelected judges?
The voters are the ones who should vote in the election according to the laws, and the laws sometimes have to be applied by the judges if there are cases.
And under our Constitution, who is charged with making policy decisions, elected representatives elected by the people or unelected federal judges?
I think the question of policy, Senator, is a little broader than the particular case. So the laws should be enacted by Congress. That's where the fountain of law.
Policy decisions are the elected branches.
Right.
Law is the province of the court. Policy is the province of the elected branches. These are not complicated. Professor Bray, let me ask you this. Do the federal courts have power to issue remedies for people who are not parties to a case?
That's a question I agree is not complicated. They do not have that power.
Is the phrase nationwide injunction or universal injunction found anywhere in the Constitution?
It is not.
First chart. In the first 150 years of our republic, how many nationwide injunctions were issued?
My view is that there were not any until 1963.
0. Now fast forward. How many nationwide injunctions were issued in the entire 20th century?
It's a small number. I would think it would be a dozen, give or take. It's not large.
27, actually. Excluding Trump's first term, how many nationwide injunctions were issued in the last 20 years?
Far more than that.
32. From 2001 to 2024 against Biden, Obama, and Bush, 32. And how many nationwide injunctions have been issued in the last 2 months alone?
There have been quite a few.
37. Let that sink in. There have been more nationwide injunctions in the past 2 months against President Trump than in the entire 20th century. There have been more nationwide injunctions against President Trump in the last 2 months than both terms of George W. Bush, both terms of Barack Obama, and Joe Biden's term. We saw during the Biden presidency lawfare, indicting President Trump 4 times, using the machinery of justice to attack him, and that was an attack on democracy, because Democrats today hate democracy. Democrats today are angry at the voters for re-electing Donald Trump and electing a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and they engaged in lawfare to stop democracy from operating. Understand, this is the second phase of lawfare, second chart. This is the second phase of lawfare. Now that their efforts to indict President Trump and stop the voters from re-electing him have failed, they're going and seeking out individual radical judges to try to shut down policies, and they are forum shopping like crazy. Give me any loon judge put on the bench by Obama or Biden who disagrees with a policy. We just saw a judge flagrantly ignore U.S. immigration law concerning TPS being revoked. U.S. law explicitly said there's no judicial review for that, but hey, they found a judge who says, you know what? We, the Democrat Party, we are the party of illegal aliens. We are the party of murderers and rapists and gang members, and the Democrat Party exists here to fight to keep murderers and rapists and gang members in your communities. There's a reason the Democrat Party is at 26% approval nationwide, because they put radical policies ahead of rule of law. Nationwide injunctions are an abuse of power. It is the judiciary acting as policy deciders, and it is incumbent on this committee and this body to rein in the abuse of power from these unelected radical judges who are trying to overturn the election because they disagree with what the voters decided.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Klobuchar.
Okay, that was a lot. Let me start with a few things. Number one, we love the democracy, and I believe what we should be having is a civil debate about how we can best, if Donald Trump wants to make changes to the government, we should be doing it in a legal way, not how he's doing it. And the only reason there's all these injunctions, Senator Cruz, is because he's violating the Constitution. Why would Trump-appointed judges...
Why don't you file them in red districts?
Senator Cruz.
Why? What did you just say?
Why don't you file them in red districts? Why are the Democrat attorneys general seeking out left-wing, blue, single
quite patient with Senator Cruz's activities in this building?
Senator Whitehouse.
He's entitled to...
I'm just going to ask for a point of order. Madam Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar.
Senator Moody, we have debates on this committee. They occur regularly.
Let's let her have her time, and then we'll get back to that. If you want to wait, we'll get back to you, Senator Cruz.
She's welcome
Senator
to answer the question or not. It's her choice.
Go ahead.
I'm so
and I would encourage you to answer.
Following Senator Cruz once again.
Excuse me?
But I will say
Excuse me? I didn't hear you. What did you say?
To be following him. He and I have a long
I was permitting you your time to continue. To be following him in order. Excuse me. Go ahead, Senator Klobuchar.
During hearing.
Go ahead, Senator
Klobuchar. That's what I'm referring to.
Go ahead.
And I will take more than my time, since he's taken more than his time to yell at me.
Go ahead.
So what I will
mark
say is that...
I'm not yelling. I asked a question.
Senator Cruz, please. I'll give you time. Senator Klobuchar, I've got the time, and you'll be allotted the time.
I am making the strong case that the reason all these cases have been filed, and the reason that these judges who have been appointed by Ronald Reagan, yes, they still exist, and the Bushes and Donald Trump, judges appointed by Donald Trump, have been making these decisions is because this is not legal. Donald Trump himself has used his social media account, the White House account, to post an image of himself wearing a crown saying, "Long live the king." The issue is that we do not live in a kingdom, and Elon Musk is not his court jester. Ours is a nation of laws in which no one is above the law. That is why 39 different judges from vastly different backgrounds, appointed by 5 different presidents, have made clear that these are illegal actions. And these judges have rightly blocked these actions. And it is important that we not lose sight of the underlying cause of these injunctions. It is not that these judges are crooked or lunatics or evil. Those are words used by the president and his allies. It is because the administration is violating the Constitution. What happens when they use these kinds of words? You see more and more threats against judges. And that is what we're seeing. That is why federal judges and the U.S. Marshals, who are responsible for protecting them, are sounding the alarm about a spike in threats against judges. This is serious. And unlike what Senator Cruz said, I'm remembering when the threat was made, the horrific threats, and the man was in Justice Kavanaugh's, on his neighborhood, on his street. On a bipartisan basis, we came together and got more funding for the judges and changed things so that they had more protection. So what he said was completely untrue in terms of Democrats and Republicans decrying violence. We didn't just decry the violence, we actually did something about it in response to a court that is run by Justice Roberts, who is a Republican appointee. So I think that kind of language actually makes the situation worse when it's not even true. But unfortunately, Senator Cruz left, so he did not hear my response to what was a lie. President Trump's attacks on these judges has made for some major, major risks for these judges. I would ask you, Mr. Panuccio, and not in a partisan way, just normal, as a partner in a law firm, have you ever taken to social media to personally attack a judge who ruled against you? That's all my question is.
Senator, thanks for the question. I think that attacking judges personally and not their reasoning, well, let me just give you a quote. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price.
I've asked
you. Want to know, you won't know what hit you if you go forward with those awful decisions. That was something that Senator Schumer said, and I thought it was awful, and it unleashed a wave of violent threats against Supreme Court justices. I do think that's problematic, that kind of language.
I have no doubt the language is a problem on the left or right. I was just asking you if you have ever personally attacked a judge after you disagreed with the ruling. I'm asking you.
I have
if
not.
You did it. Thank you. And you believe that the proper recourse is to appeal when you disagree with the ruling?
When I disagree with a ruling on behalf of a client, I appeal.
Thank you. That was all I wanted. I was not going to criticize you. I believed that you would not have done this. And so that is my point. When people do this, and right now we have not just a random person on social media doing it, we have the President of the United States doing it. And I would just ask you, Professor Vladeck, in your opinion, are the judges who ruled against the president radical and rogue judges?
No. And just if I might, even though he has also left the room, Senator Schmidt suggested it was statistically impossible that Chief Judge Boasberg has been assigned to multiple cases in the D.C. District Court. I think that rhetoric is highly inflammatory, in addition to being just mathematically incorrect. There are 31 different cases in the D.C. District Court alone in which D.C. district judges have ruled against the administration. There are 11 or 12 active district judges. The notion that one of those judges would have multiple of those cases is not statistically impossible, it's statistically certain.
And if the president does not want to have judge rule against him, isn't the answer that he just follows the law?
One would think, but I think we live in a bit of an upside-down world at the moment.
Okay, so this hearing was titled in a very academic fashion, Universal Injunctions. And we can make it all academic if we want. Clearly we haven't with Senator Cruz's remarks. But I just want to make the point that this has a real consequence, that these cases that are coming before these judges. This is outside of their decision, which is based on the law and the facts. Sometimes they've ruled with the president, sometimes they've ruled against the president. But just to get it so people understand this isn't just some academic exercise about injunctions and if they're a good thing to have legally. Last month, a federal judge blocked the administration's plan to slash NIH funding for medical research. Could you talk about the impact if the judge had not been able to issue a nationwide injunction?
Sure. So Senator, briefly, because I know our time is limited, NIH hands out thousands and thousands and thousands of grants. If you required the recipients of each grant to litigate the rescission of each of those grants on a retail basis, you would have gaps in cancer research. You'd have gaps in all kinds of work by the National Institutes of Health, because it's not possible that those thousands of the mass action by the government could be challenged on a retail basis in federal courts.
Thank you so much. And
Could I get a second round of
Senator
questions?
Klobuchar, oh, I allowed you to go way over your time in order to make
Are we
up, and I
having a
wrote it
second
down.
round?
Make two brief observations. Number one, it is interesting as our Democrat colleagues defend these nationwide injunctions that neither of them made any reference to the fact that the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined, nor did they address the disturbing fact that of the 40 universal injunctions that have been issued in the last 4 months, 35 of them came from the same 5 judicial districts. There is a reason for this. Blue state attorneys general and radical leftist groups are seeking out affirmatively radical judges who they know will impose their own policy preferences. If it were simply, as our Democrat colleagues said, judges following the law, then you wouldn't have to keep going to the same radical judges over and over and over again, because judges across the board should do that. But the litigants know exactly who the zealots are that are on the bench, and that's who they are seeking out. I will also point out that the discussion about the urgency of protecting the safety of judges, listen, I agree. We should protect the safety of every federal judge, but it is interesting because my Democrat colleagues were utterly silent during 4 years of the Biden administration when you had violent mobs outside the homes of Supreme Court justices unhappy with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs, and the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce federal law and protect the justices. And my Democrat colleagues were perfectly happy with Supreme Court justices being threatened if they disliked the rulings that were coming from the Supreme Court justices. Unlike my colleagues, I believe we should protect judges regardless of whether I agree with them or not. We should protect their safety. And every time you hear a Democrat senator talk about protecting judges from acts of violence, you ought to ask them, why did they not have a word to say about the Biden Justice Department allowing mobs to threaten the families and children of Supreme Court justices night after night after night while Biden's Attorney General refused to follow the law? And with that, I'll recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. They asked Winston Churchill after World War II.
Would you indulge me for a moment?
We indulge you every moment.
I appreciate that act of generosity. It's just something you said that I think is actually dangerous and should be addressed, and you're welcome. But when Judge Anderol was killed in New Jersey, the Republican colleagues in the Senate, their outpouring of support, their outpouring of concern, they're willing to work together on a bipartisan bill was extraordinary. It shows the truth of this institution that despite some of the fiery rhetoric that you were sowing, we're really a bipartisan, working bipartisanship. Cornyn and Coons, after the incidents you're talking about, got together and actually passed a bill to better protect our Supreme Court justices, many of whom are friends of ours. You know, Gorsuch and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I knew his wife before he did. We studied together at Oxford. This implication that there was silence when there were threats on their people's houses is absolutely absurd. I remember the rhetoric and the comments, the concern from Coons. I actually distinctly remember you, Chairman, on more than once condemning those attacks on Republican-appointed jurists. To say things like that feeds just the partisanship in this institution and feeds the fiery rhetoric. And it's just plain not true. It's just plain not true. And I think you know that, but we can pull from the record from my colleagues in real time, literally days afterwards, condemning it. There's a lot of substantive things to say here, but to think that the lack of humanity when people's homes are being threatened was not in existence, I think that's unfair and really concerns me that you would say that in the way that you did.
Well, I thank my colleague from New Jersey. I will note, as John Adams observed, that facts are stubborn things. And it is existing federal law, 18 U.S.C. Section 1507, that makes it a crime to protest at a judge's home. and the law provides, whoever with the intent of interfering with, obstructing, or impeding the administration of justice, or with the intent or of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty, pickets or parades in or near a building housing a court of the United States, in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness, or court officer, or with such intent uses any sound truck or similar device or resorts to any other demonstration in or near any such building or residence, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. That is federal criminal law. Night after night after night, angry mobs were outside the Supreme Court justices' homes, and in the entire course of it, the Biden Justice Department prosecuted nobody. We had the Attorney General sitting at that table, and multiple Republican senators asked him, why are you not enforcing the law? What they are doing is a crime. And my friend from New Jersey said, it is a lie to say we, the Democrats, condone this. I would challenge, my friend, find a single Democrat senator on this committee holding the Attorney General to account for not enforcing this law. I was here at those hearings, and I do not recall a single Democrat senator saying to the Attorney General, you should arrest these people who are violating the law, you should protect the judges. I agree that there was general language against violence, but not a single Democrat senator that I ever saw in this committee was willing to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland to account for flagrantly disregarding the federal criminal law because the Biden administration agreed with the protesters and I think wanted those justices harassed at their home.
I really appreciate that you've now shifted the accusation you made earlier. Your accusation was that we were silent in the face of protests at Supreme Court justices' homes. Again, we joined together in a bipartisan way, not only to condemn that, but to pass legislation to extend round-the-clock security protection, literally days. It was introduced May 5th, passed the Senate in a bipartisan fashion on May 9th. So if you're saying that we didn't criticize Merrick Garland—
Did the Biden DOJ arrest a single person under this law?
You are now changing the
No, that is what I said. That is what I said.
Again, I'll pull the record.
Did the Biden DOJ arrest even one?
Again.
The answer is no.
My point to you is the accusation that the Democrats on this committee do not care about the safety of federal judges. I did not interrupt you, sir. I would appreciate if you let me finish. I am sick and tired of hearing the kind of heated partisan rhetoric, which is one of the reasons why we have such divisions in this country. The attacks we see from the President of the United States of America trolling and dragging judges through is what we should be talking about, that puts people in danger. I'm simply taking issue with the claim that you made at the top that people on the Democratic side of the aisle do not care about the safety and the security of judges and said nothing. You said we were silent after people's houses were protested. That is a patent lie, sir. We were not silent. We took action. We joined in a bipartisan way to protect those judges, as was done in a bipartisan way to protect a New Jersey judge after their horrific attack at their home. So I see you now trying to shift the debate to whether we talk to an attorney general. I'm simply taking issue with this accusation that somehow we Democrats are so bad because we don't call out threats to our judicial colleagues. And that is wrong. You could change the argument now that you want, but what you said was patently not true and was, in fact, a patent lie.
So I do enjoy the fact that my colleague from New Jersey raises his voice and says it's a patent lie and says he's doing so in defense of lowering the rhetoric. There is some irony to doing those two together. I'll point out that in the entire course of those remarks, Senator Booker did not dispute the central point I made, which is the Biden Justice Department arrested 0 people, prosecuted 0 people for violating the criminal law, and every Democrat senator on this committee was silent about it. And this was an ongoing pattern for months. And I would note also that the senator from New Jersey clutched his pearls about language threatening judges, and yet I do not recall a single Democrat senator of this committee saying a word when Chuck Schumer went to the steps of the Supreme Court and threatened the safety of the Supreme Court justices by name, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and he said, "You have unleashed the whirlwind and you will pay the price." And not a single Democrat senator had a word to say about this. And so their outrage is selective. And I will give my colleague from New Jersey a chance to just answer a simple yes-no question. Should the Biden Justice Department have enforced the criminal law against protesting at a justice's home? Yes or no?
So the rank hypocrisy of Chuck Schumer apologizing the next day and you holding that standard for him and not for your president, who you actually rightfully described when you were running against him in a primary. I would love to run those tapes of how you perfectly talked about the danger of our president and his rhetoric. But now you are failing, in fact, blind to the very things you're accusing Chuck Schumer of. I don't think Donald Trump would know an apology if it hit him in the head. Never has said apologizing. So again, you are very, very, sir, very, very deep into the waters of hypocrisy in your criticisms of Chuck Schumer.
So let the record reflect that Spartacus did not answer the question and did not tell us whether the criminal law should be enforced, because he knows the answer is yes, and he knows that the Biden Department of Justice was being wildly political and partisan in refusing to enforce the law because they disagreed with the Supreme Court justices' rulings. I have also, in addition to Senator Durbin, who's given his opening statement, I have a written opening statement from Chairman Grassley. Without objection, that written statement is entered into the record, and I will now briefly introduce our distinguished witnesses. We have three. Thank you to each of the witnesses for your testimony. Professor Blackman, prior to 1963, had any federal court issued a nationwide injunction blocking federal law or executive policy?
I'm not aware of any.
Would you agree that from the founding through the 20th century, the federal judiciary consistently understood its powers to be limited to the parties before the court?
Yes.
And would you agree that the widespread use of universal or nationwide injunctions, especially against presidential actions, is a recent development emerging in the last decade?
Yes.
That's important history, because what we're seeing now is not normal, and we have over 2 centuries of history when this didn't happen. It is instead a novel and dangerous concentration of judicial power. When a single district judge issues a nationwide injunction, are they acting as a constitutional judge or as a de facto national policymaker?
It's effectively a veto in the executive branch.
We've seen district judges block President Trump's policies on immigration, energy, birthright citizenship, and even federal hiring and firing, all prior to any appellate review, all without any input from Congress, all from one single judge. Let me offer an analogy. Suppose the federal government approves a plan to cut down trees in a national forest to make way for a pipeline. One person who occasionally camps in that forest files a lawsuit. The judge not only grants relief to that individual, but certifies a putative class action on behalf of all campers nationwide and issues an order blocking any tree cutting in any forest used by any member of the putative class across all 50 states. Professor Blackman, is that consistent with the Constitution's design for judicial relief?
No, it is not.
Or is that rather a recipe for nationwide paralysis based on a single courtroom?
Yes.
Would you also agree that the proper constitutional remedy is to address the plaintiff's actual injury, not to give one judge the power to halt activity unrelated to the case at hand?
Article 3 requires that.
And how does Article 3 require that?
Article 3 speaks of cases and controversies. As specific people have specific injuries. You cannot grant relief to broad classes doing a certain injury before the court.
And if broader relief is truly necessary, wouldn't that be better handled by class certification, by the appellate courts, or by Congress, not a lone district judge rewriting national policy?
Absolutely.
Can you explain how this pattern of nationwide relief not only intrudes on the president's Article II powers, but also undermines Congress's own lawmaking authority?
What ends up happening is you file many lawsuits in many districts seeking parallel relief, and it only takes one judge to grant the universal injunction. And once the judge grants the injunction, it's off to the races. Unless ruling stayed, the executive branch must immediately halt what it's doing. And this has really changed the way the executive branch and the courts have operated, as you said, over the past decade. And I think this time is ripe to actually address this issue and figure a way to stop this sort of insanity. We can't leave it to the Supreme Court to figure everything out.
And Professor Blackman, your testimony outlines structural reforms that Congress could enact to restore balance. Can you explain how requiring a three-judge panel drawn from both district and circuit judges would deter judicial overreach and restore legitimacy to preliminary relief?
Well, this is how Congress ran things for much of the 20th century. They stopped in the 60s and 70s. The benefit of a three-judge panel is you have diverse voices. In fact, even on this dais, you don't always agree with each other. But when you talk to each other, you find perhaps the closer truth. A single judge acting by himself or herself can often be like a god. There's no limitation on what they can do. But the benefit is if you have two circuit and one district, you're basically bypassing this next layer of review. Have the initial panel, three judges, and have managed review by the Supreme Court. To cut out this race to the Court of Appeals, this race to the Supreme Court, let's compress the process and get to the result quickly enough so these issues of national significance are resolved fairly.
And by the way, if the characterization of these nationwide injunctions by my Democrat colleagues was accurate, if this was simply a result of, in their view, Trump's repeated lawless activities, one would assume a three-judge panel would find the same ruling on the merits as a particular lone district judge. Is that correct?
In theory, but if drawn randomly, I think it's less likely. Random draws of three-judge panels would be a very good change to see how things would work out.
Well, and much like Sherlock Holmes and the lesson he derived from the dog that did not bark, in this case, when we hear our Democrat colleagues talking about this is simply enforcing the law, the dog that isn't barking is why do they keep going to the same handful of radical judges in bright blue districts? And why will every Democrat on this panel oppose any effort to require a three-judge panel for a nationwide injunction? And the answer is they know fully well that a fair panel would reject the vast majority of these claims. And at the end of the day, I think too many Democrat members of this body want to frustrate the will of the voters who reelected President Trump and elected a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and they're perfectly happy for lone judges to impose their own policy preferences rather than respect the democratic will of the voters. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you.
I now recognize Ranking Member Welch.
Thank you very much. You know, the concrete issues of a universal injunction or forum shopping are things that we can address. But there is a context that we're all operating in, and this is where I disagree with my colleagues, particularly Senator Cruz and his recitation of what he saw as a judicial rampage. This moment we're in our country, is testing whether the separation of powers, three co-equal branches of government, shall endure. That's really the question. We've seen an abdication of constitutional responsibility by the Congress. It's appalling. Ceding to a president the ability to impound funds, something that was declared unconstitutional in the Nixon Doctrine. Ceding to the president tariff authority, which in the Constitution belongs to the policymakers in Congress. Just two examples of Congress ceding its constitutional authority. That's done willingly by my colleagues in the House and some in the Senate. We should reassert our authority. But the second leg of that, the transfer of authority to the executive, is the rampant attack on the judiciary. And Senator Cruz gave some examples of what he thought was judicial overreach. Each one of those examples, as I see it, was the judges doing their job. They disagreed. And when they disagreed, it was asserted by the president and by the attorney general that they were monsters, they were renegades, they were out of control. It was an ad hominem attack because judges were doing their jobs. And I will say we can deal with the forum shopping, which is something the private bar gets involved in. We can deal with universal injunctions. But the all-out assault on judges, because they make decisions, which is the job it is they have to do. And the decision is, has a president exceeded his authority? The decision is, has the Congress passed a law that deviates from constitutional requirements? Those are so profoundly important to keep that separation of powers and to keep the competition between the three branches so that we don't have absolute power vested in a single person, and that's the chief executive. So when, Senator Cruz, you talk about a judge making this decision about keeping somebody here, it's called due process. I'm for due process. When we talk about judges striking down under the international trade agreement, whether the president has authority to set these tariffs, and it's a three-judge decision, one appointed by Trump, one appointed by Obama, one appointed by Reagan, and they say the president didn't have authority, I would say that is the judges doing their jobs. But what is most profoundly important for the well-being of our country is that the Congress reassert its authority to pass laws, to restrict the executive or to empower the executive, but not to cede our authority to the executive ever. And it's our responsibility to do every single thing we can to validate the legitimate exercise of the decision-making authority of the judiciary. I look forward to this hearing and the testimony of the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I would make two brief observations. Number one, it is interesting as our Democrat colleagues defend these nationwide injunctions that neither of them made any reference to the fact that the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined, nor did they address the disturbing fact that of the 40 universal injunctions that have been issued in the last 4 months, 35 of them came from the same 5 judicial districts. There is a reason for this. Blue state attorneys general and radical leftist groups are seeking out affirmatively radical judges who they know will impose their own policy preferences. If it were simply, as our Democrat colleagues said, judges following the law, then you wouldn't have to keep going to the same radical judges over and over and over again, because judges across the board should do that. But the litigants know exactly who the zealots are that are on the bench, and that's who they are seeking out. I will also point out that the discussion about the urgency of protecting the safety of judges. Listen, I agree. We should protect the safety of every federal judge, but it is interesting because my Democrat colleagues were utterly silent during 4 years of the Biden administration when you had violent mobs outside the homes of Supreme Court justices unhappy with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs, and the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce federal law and protect the justices. And my Democrat colleagues were perfectly happy with Supreme Court justices being threatened if they disliked the rulings that were coming from the Supreme Court justices. Unlike my colleagues, I believe we should protect judges regardless of whether I agree with them or not. We should protect their safety. And every time you hear a Democrat senator talk about protecting judges from acts of violence, you ought to ask them, why did they not have a word to say about the Biden Justice Department allowing mobs to threaten the families and children of Supreme Court justices night after night after night while Biden's Attorney General refused to follow the law? And with that, I'll recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
Mr. President.
The senator from Hawaii.
Mr. President, I call up my amendment 2382 and ask that it be reported by number.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Hawaii, Ms. Hirono, proposes for herself and others amendment number 2382 to amendment number 2360.
Mr. President, nearly 90% of K-12 students attend public schools, yet Republicans are pushing a plan in this bill to undermine support for public schools through the first ever nationwide private school voucher program. Republicans claim vouchers are about expanding school choice, but evidence shows these kinds of programs do little to meaningfully increase choice for families, especially low-income families and those who live in rural communities. When it comes down to it, this plan does not help students, it does not promote choice, it does not support public schools. We should be investing in public education for all Americans, not diverting tax dollars to private schools. That's why my amendment with Senator Van Hollen would strip this provision from this bill. Stand up for our nation's students, teachers, and families by rejecting this provision and supporting our amendment. I yield back.
Mr. President.
The senator from Texas.
There are many important elements to the one big beautiful bill, but none over time is likely to have as big an impact as this specific provision that the Democrats are trying to strike tonight. Across America, millions of children, especially low-income African American and Hispanic children, are trapped in failing schools. They face crime and violence and despair. Without the ability to learn and prosper, they are denied a fair shot at the American dream. School choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Every child, regardless of race or wealth or ethnicity, deserves access to an excellent education. This tax credit provision will unleash billions of dollars every single year for scholarships for kids to attend the K-12 school of their choice. Sadly, every Democrat in this body will oppose these scholarships because they're more beholden to teacher union bosses than they are dedicated to fighting for kids. Mr. President, Dr. King's dream will take a major step forward tonight, as every kid in America will have a chance at an excellent education.
Mr. President,
Questions on the amendment?
do I have any time left?
There's no time remaining. Questions on the amendment? It's a voice vote. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett.
I thank my friend from New Mexico, and I would note that the Department of Transportation, Office of Multimodal Transportation is unlikely to have any direct responsibilities concerning January 6th. And if we want to have a discussion about January 6th, I'm more than happy to do so, and I'm happy to say under no way, shape, or form was January 6th an insurrection. I think that's a term that is loaded with partisan content and inaccurately describes what occurred that day. But given this hearing is on DOT nominees, this is probably not
Mr.
the
Chairman,
right forum.
I think we can both agree it was a bad day, though.
I think this is not the right forum for that discussion. Senator Moreno.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of you on being nominated. I'm sure you feel the way most people would feel in your position, which is it's a great honor to be asked by the President of the United States to serve their country. Ms. Oz, I'll start with you. When you look at your job and making certain that we're advancing research and technology in the automobile industry, where do you see a vision of where we are from a transportation perspective in, let's say, 10 or 15 years? Is private ownership of cars still a factor, or are self-driving autonomous vehicles going to be the primary and only means of transportation?
Senator, first of all, it's good to see you. I enjoyed our time together in your offices, beautiful offices. And we touched on some of these subjects, and I appreciate your interest in the automotive industry and of your continued commitment. I do believe Americans deserve a choice. They deserve a choice on what type of modality they wish to use to get from point A to point B. In some cases, we may no longer want or need to drive in traffic anymore. So, and in some cases, we want to turn on the ignition and just, go on a deep rural drive somewhere in the back road. So we should have that choice. There is some learnings that we can take probably from the first use cases for the self-driving cars other than freight will most likely be in the realm of fleet management, because it's going to be easier to maintain fleets of vehicles, turn them onto home base, get them maintained properly. But that will also mean more cars being sold in total volume, because if you can drive 100,000 miles in 1 year on a fleet vehicle with 90% utility optimization, you can sell more cars.
Sure. Well, again, I'm not concerned about the number of vehicles sold. I'm concerned about ultimately, are we looking to replace private ownership of cars? Like that's my main question, because here's the concern I have. During the Biden administration, they had a very unhealthy obsession with EVs, and that led to a disastrous amount of government money spent, hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies. They drove car companies almost off the cliff to make EVs. California, of course, lost their mind, whatever was left of it, and wanted everybody driving an electric vehicle. Thanks to the Congressional Review Act, we ended that. Thanks to our chairman, who did a lot of work with the One Big Beautiful Bill, we've now made kind of an old-fashioned concept come true, which is car companies should make the cars that people want to buy. So my question to you, and what I worry about, is that we don't want to go from an obsession with EVs to an obsession with AVs. And we obviously understand level 1 autonomy to level 4 autonomy. Totally understand, as long as it's optional, as long as it's not mandated that somebody buy that tech. One of the things I find interesting is my colleagues talk about how all these safety technologies should be mandated. I took the time to find out what kind of cars they personally drive, and you'd be shocked to know that they didn't purchase themselves those advanced driving technologies. So they don't want to spend their own personal money to buy more safety systems in their own cars, but want to mandate that very same technology for all Americans. Rules for thee, but not for me. My question to you, when you're advising our great Secretary of Transportation / NASA administrator, maybe we'll nominate him to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve too. He would definitely do a better job than Jerome Powell, but that's a different topic for a different
I think they're giving that to Marco Rubio.
Well, I think the quote is 4 jobs. So Sean still has a couple more left. But back to the point, when you're advising him, I just want to be clear-eyed about your advice to him. Is it going to be, hey, we have to move to level 5 autonomy and start down the path of eliminating private ownership of cars? Or is this, how do we invest more in level 1 through level 4 to drive those technologies to be less expensive so that more customers on their own, like my colleagues who currently have not chosen to buy those technologies because maybe they thought they were too expensive to have? And it's a big difference in that conversation.
Senator, I appreciate the analysis, and cost and affordability is a critical measurement in terms of this freedom. And I think we support, and I will support all of the above in terms of level 1 through level 4. I don't think we'll see level 5 in my lifetime, but I do think that we can see this capability deployed on all different types of engines, whether they're ICE or electric. So in that case, I think I would support your view on this. Thank you.
Yeah, because what I don't want to live is in a dystopian future in which big tech controls the transportation industry in America. As you know, and we talked about this in my office, America did not invent the automobile, but we invented what the automobile became. And the automobile is the ultimate expression of freedom. The idea that I'm here in Washington, D.C., I can go wherever the heck I want in a car that I own. Not controlled by big tech, not controlled by government. I can decide what kind of car I buy with my own money. It's a concept that my Democrat colleagues over the last 4 years lost sight of. They said all of the above. They said we want to give consumers choice, but in reality, the heavy, heavy hand of government was taking away those choices. And I just want to be incredibly clear that from your perspective, this is not about mandating or driving America towards the point in time in which the only people that control transportation in this country is giant technology companies that would mine our data and have complete control over our lives because it can control where we went and how we went there. I just want to be clear that that is absolutely not something that you would support.
I will support the freedom of choice and the freedom to drive in this country because it's a part of our way of life.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barnes, I was struck by your opening comments, and I asked to get a copy of them so I could read them and make sure I quoted them correctly. You state, and this is a quote from Secretary Rubio, "Our rights come from God, our Creator, not from our laws, not from our governments." I find that very, very troubling. I'm a devout person. I was a missionary in Honduras. We've got other devout folks in this room, Christian, Jewish, Muslim American. The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the Creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their Creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling. I think the motto over the Supreme Court is equal justice under law. The oath that you and I take, pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not arbitrarily defined natural rights. I'm a strong believer in natural rights, but I have a feeling if we were to have a debate about natural rights in the room and put people around the table with different religious traditions, there would be some significant differences in the definitions of those natural rights. You go on to say, "I believe our country and our government is the best in the world, and our strength comes from our enduring values." I believe that. But then you say, and you got to choose what to say in your opening testimony, these values aren't an endless list of, quote, rights. You put the quote around that to kind of demean the notion of rights that people create and change and form to meet their own needs or desires. These values aren't identity politics. They're the historic natural rights that we have as individuals pursuing life, liberty, and happiness in the world. Pursuing life, liberty, and happiness. The State Department's Human Rights Report has just struck out all references to the rights of LGBTQ people in countries and the way countries treat LGBTQ people. I mean, do they have a right to liberty? Do they have a right to life? Do they have a right to happiness? Senator Murphy pointed out that the Human Rights Report has taken out information about freedom of association, about freedom of expression, about exploitation of children, about prison conditions. These were all part of the human rights reports that have been done for years by the State Department. I think these are things that are connected to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They've now all been removed from the State Department's annual human rights report. And the notion that, well, we wanted to make it shorter or more readable just doesn't pass the laugh test with me and many others on this committee. I'm not really going to ask you about your testimony because I believe you offered that in a very sincere way, and I don't want to try to change your opinion on something you sincerely believe. But the notion that our rights do not come from our laws or our government should make people very, very nervous. Because people of any religious tradition or none are entitled to the equal protection of the laws under the 14th Amendment. It shouldn't matter what their religious background is, what they think about God or the Creator, what their church affiliation is. You are entitled in this country, every person, to the equal protection of the laws. And so to demean laws and demean governments and suggest that rights don't come from laws and governments, I mean, again, I think there are such things as natural rights, and I try to live in accord with them. But I would never demean the law. We are a nation of laws, not men. Laws, not people. And if we now, after nearly 250 years, suddenly start to demean that or diminish that and suggest, no, it's natural rights as defined by a leader, the leader of Iran or the leader of any nation, that does not create a place of safety or comfort for folks. Mr. Wilcox, I want to just...
Mr. Barnes, I'd actually like to go back to the exchange you had with Senator Kaine, and I wish Senator Kaine was still here. Senator Kaine and I were elected together 13 years ago. He is a friend. I would actually encourage observers to go back and listen to what Senator Kaine said, because I have to say I think was disturbing and showed much of where today's Democrat Party has gone wrong. So Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. I just walked into the hearing as he was saying that, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because that radical and dangerous notion, in his words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. And if you do not believe me, and you made reference to this, Mr. Barnes, then you can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, not by government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." I have to say it is stunning to me that the principle that God has given us natural rights is now deemed by Democrats some radical and dangerous notion. Mr. Jefferson was right when he wrote those words. Government exists to protect those rights. But slavery was not okay when U.S. law allowed it. It was wrong then, it is wrong now, it is always wrong. I guess I would just ask you, your role is going to be very much a role designed to defend human rights across the globe. Do you agree with what I just said? And what do you think about the concept that the founding principles of America are radical and dangerous? What do you think about that particular notion?
Yes, Senator, I appreciate the question. I'll just say, I think one of the ideas behind, we have a new office in DRL, Office of Natural Rights, post the reorganization. I think one of the ideas behind that is you actually have the most consensus behind these natural rights than the kind of, maybe hot button issues of the day. And so we should champion those. As Senator Kaine mentioned, all are created equal. We agree with that. That's in the Declaration of Independence, as is endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say, it used to be that to see theater, you had to go to the Kennedy Center. Now, apparently, you need only go to the Senate Judiciary Committee and see our Senate Democrats berating the director of the FBI, which, okay, it's not, partisan politics is not new in the United States Congress. But what is remarkable is what Senator Booker was berating Director Patel about. He wasn't berating him for failing to do his job, but rather he was furious for Director Patel for successfully doing his job. For 4 years, the Democrats under Joe Biden had an open border that undermined the safety of every single American. They allowed 12 million illegal aliens to come into this country to invade this country, and every single day Americans were murdered, women were raped, children were assaulted by violent criminals that Democrats released. Now, Director Patel, I found Senator Booker's questioning really bizarre. He asked you, have you reassigned FBI agents from human trafficking to immigration issues? Director Patel, are the Mexican cartels that are bringing people illegally into this country engaged in human trafficking?
Yes, sir.
What the hell does it mean to reassign someone from human trafficking to immigration? The greatest human trafficking in the world has been over the last 4 years at our southern border. It is modern-day slavery that the Democrats still defend. They still defend those open borders. Mr. Patel, he also said, did you reassign FBI agents from protecting children to immigration? How many children have you found that were victimized by the open borders of the previous administration?
4,700.
4,700. And yet, oddly, I don't hear a Democrat here saying, gosh, thanks for protecting those kids.
35% increase year to date last year.
All right, I want to shift topic. You know, it's clear from this hearing the Democrat talking points have come out. Both Senator Padilla and Senator Booker spent a great deal of time talking about, quote, red states. There's a reason they were talking about red states, because unfortunately most red states have blue cities, and that's where the crime is. If you want to look at in 2023, the large cities with the most homicides per 100,000 people, number 1 was New Orleans, Louisiana. Number 2 was Memphis, Tennessee. Number 3 was St. Louis City. Number 4 was Baltimore City. Number 5 was Washington, D.C. Democrat crime policies kill people. Soros DAs who let murderers out of jail kill people. When you don't prosecute violent criminals, innocent victims die. Right here in Washington, D.C., in 2012, murders in D.C. totaled fewer than 100. By 2023, murders had nearly tripled, 274 lives taken in a single year. These are the real-world consequences of Democrat crime policies that let murderers go. It is very simple cause and effect. If you release murderers onto the street, they will kill people, and they do it all across the country. And we need to understand these are not just numbers. Here are some of the faces behind those numbers. Edward Corestein, 19, brutally assaulted during a carjacking attempt in D.C. Eric Tarpinian Jackim, 21, a young congressional intern gunned down in the capital city. Honesty Cheadle, 3 years old, just a toddler, killed by stray gunfire. Sarah Lynn Milgram, 26, and Yaron Lachinsky, 30, Israeli embassy staffers newly in love on the verge of engagement, brutally murdered. Mike Gill, 56, a husband, father of 3. Former Trump administration official shot in cold blood during a D.C. carjacking rampage. These aren't just names. These are sons and daughters, husbands and wives, parents and grandchildren. Mrs. Cook, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing the unbelievable pain and loss that you have endured through the loss of your grandson. I'm sorry that happened. Your grandson should have been protected. The city should have protected your grandson. He should still be alive. And tragically, this pattern keeps on happening. Now, Senator Booker also said we should have bipartisan agreement. I think that's a great idea. We should have bipartisan agreement. How about we all come together and say, let's stop murders? How about we all come together and say, let's stop rape? How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles? I want you to look at what happened when the National Guard went to D.C. Robbery fell by 57%. Homicide fell by 58%. Sex abuse fell by 40%. Those are real results. And Detective Pemberton, if you would tell this committee what was the effect of the 2022 Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Law, and what would the benefit be for the people of D.C. if Congress passes my Clean D.C. Act?
Thank you, Senator Cruz, and thank you for introducing the Clean D.C. Act, which repeals the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Act. It is unquestionably one of the worst pieces of legislation, public safety legislation I've ever seen, and it has completely dismantled and destroyed the Metropolitan Police Department to the tune of more than 800 police officers short. It has eliminated their bargaining rights. It has eliminated their due process rights. It has changed the use of force policy so that facts unknown to officers can be used against them in charging them criminally. It exposes all of their personnel records to public databases. I could go on and on. It is an 86-page bill. Each subtitle in that bill is worse than the last, and it was designed to defund and destroy the police department. It was designed to hamstring police officers and make sure that criminals, even when convicted, would be protected from being held accountable. repealing that bill is everything. It is the alpha and the omega of fixing criminal justice in the District of Columbia, and we must repeal that as soon as possible. This is what we have been shouting from the rooftops for 5 years. We knew it when we saw the language in the bill that it was going to be devastating. No one would listen to us. And thankfully now, thanks to your bill and Congressman Clyde's bill on the House side, we can actually get this bill repealed so we can get back to fixing the police department and bringing crime down permanently in the nation's capital.
And Detective Pemberton, you're the head of the D.C. Police Officers Union.
Yes, sir.
In your judgment, passing the Clean D.C. Act would make Washington, D.C. safer, would reduce murders, would reduce violent crime?
Permanently, yes, sir.
And I would point out again, Senator Booker, and it seems none of the Democrats are here now, Senator Booker said we should be bipartisan. I can think of few issues that are more natural for bipartisanship than stopping crime. It used to be the case. You know, this committee used to work together when it came to violent crime. It's only been in the last few years that elected Democrats have decided that releasing violent criminals is something to be celebrated. Earlier, Mr. Taylor made reference to Soros DAs. George Soros has spent millions of dollars electing DAs all over the country who turn around and let violent criminals go. The Democrat Party unleashed the crazy with the Abolish the Police movement. And the Abolish the Police movement wasn't just in the abstract. Cities all across the country slash funding for police. Minneapolis slashed the funding for police. The NYPD cut its funding over $1 billion. Sadly, Austin, Texas cut the funding for its police $150 million. When you take police off the streets, people die. There's a direct cause and effect, but there are two ways to abolish the police. One is going after the police themselves, which Democrats have decided that is their party position. But the second way you abolish the police is you put in place Soros DAs who just won't charge anyone. That means the police cannot do their job because when they arrest a murderer, a Soros DA turns around and lets them go. When they arrest a carjacker, a Soros DA turns around and lets them go. And for the life of me, I do not understand why Democrats are not celebrating the reduction in crime, go back to the reduction in crime in D.C., that we've seen with the guard on the ground. You should be cheering a 57% decrease in crime, robbery, a 58% decrease in homicide. There are people in D.C. alive because the guard is there, and not a single Democrat is saying, that's good. Not a single Democrat is saying, we're glad those people are alive. Instead, they're saying, take them off the street and let the murderers run free.
Senator,
that's not serving anybody.
Senator Hall.
Are there any additional amendments or additional discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Markey.
I want to call up next Markey Amendment number 3.
It is called up. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment would ensure the report considers the impact on foreign direct investment when President Trump makes financial success dependent on political favors or personal loyalty to him. Investors place capital where the rules are predictable and success depends on innovation, not political loyalty. When foreign companies perceive that advancement in the United States market requires currying favor with politicians, they view the environment as corrupt or risky. This perception deters legitimate investment, particularly from allies who expect transparent, rules-based commerce. Such crony capitalism is pervasive in the Trump administration. The examples are endless. Apple CEO Tim Cook brings a custom glass plaque with a 24-karat gold base to the White House for Trump. A UAE ruler invests in a Trump-linked crypto fund 2 weeks before securing Trump's approval on a major semiconductor deal. Companies with the closest Trump connections receive tariff waivers, while those without such connections are left out. Day after day, companies with ties to the White House and Donald Trump are rewarded with favorable contracts and political benefits, and these types of deals are offensive to a rules-based economy and will inevitably give investors pause about investing in the United States. For that reason, Markey Amendment number 3 would ensure that the report studies how such crony capitalism and political favoritism affect foreign investment decisions, and I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Markey. I oppose this amendment and urge that my colleagues vote no. The underlying bill is a bipartisan bill. This amendment is not drafted or intended to further those bipartisan aims. Rather, this amendment is a partisan critique of President Trump and the Trump administration. Now, I recognize it is no secret to anyone in this room that Senator Markey disagrees with President Trump, and indeed our Democrat colleagues disagree with President Trump. But at the end of the day, the purpose of this bill is not to voice the political disagreement of some members of this body with President Trump. It is rather to advance bipartisan ends. And so for those reasons, I urge a no vote. Is there any additional discussion?
Roll call vote, please.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Thune?
No by proxy.
Mr. Wicker? No. Mrs. Fisher? No. Mr. Moran? No. Mr. Sullivan?
No by proxy.
Mrs. Blackburn? No. Mr. Young? No. Mr. Budd? No. Mr. Schmidt? No. Mr. Curtis? Mr. Moreno? No. Mr. Sheehy? No. Mrs. Capito? No. Ms. Lummis? No. Ms. Cantwell?
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Schatz?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Markey?
Aye.
Mr. Peters?
Aye.
Ms. Baldwin?
Aye.
Ms. Duckworth?
Aye by proxy.
Ms. Rosen? Aye. Mr. Lujan? Aye. Mr. Hickenlooper? Aye. Mr. Fetterman?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Kim? Aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cruz?
No.
The noes are 15, the yeses are 13.
The amendment is not adopted.
And people don't have unlimited budgets when they come buy a car, right? So they don't just go in and say, I'll take every option. Would you agree?
I do agree with that.
Would it surprise you that I got the VIN numbers of every one of my Democrat colleagues' vehicles and found that none of them bought any of the additional safety technologies on their cars?
I did not know that, Senator.
So when you are actually shopping for a car with your own money, you don't buy the technology. But we're sitting here saying that this should be mandated for everybody else's cars. And what's been the result? We drove up the price of cars, almost doubled in the last 10 years. Car prices have doubled in the last 10 years. That's why cars are now 13 years old and why the fleet is less safe.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to ask unanimous consent for something to be submitted to the record, because I'd like to ask for Senator Moreno to submit to the committee how he obtained our personal VIN numbers, what he plans to do with them, and appears to be a clear overreach and violation of our privacy and not accurate as to what he said, especially about, I can talk about my own vehicles. And so I'm asking for unanimous consent to find out what he is trying to find out about my automobile ownership.
The VIN numbers are displayed on the windshield of the car.
So I'm not going to get back and forth and use my time. So you went into my garage in Las Vegas to find the VIN number on my car.
You have a car that you drive here, or do you walk?
Mr. Chairman, I'll talk to you after, but I do not have a car that I drive here, sir.
You drive in a car here?
That is my staff's car.
So you're not concerned about your staff safety?
I am not going to get back and forth with you. I am just telling you that I'm asking unanimous consent that for you to submit to this committee what VIN numbers you have, whose privacy you violated, and what you plan to do with it. That's all. I'd like to move on to international tourism now.
Thank you. Senator Moreno has asked for a moment.
I just need a real quick question for Mr. Edwards. But before I do, as somebody who's been here 10 months, I think what we just saw was exactly classic Washington, D.C. In other words, the car that I drive should be safe. The car that my staff drives, who cares about them? I get a paycheck.
I object to you stalking my car and my staff to find the VIN numbers to present to this committee. What are you doing there? What are you going to do with them? It's an invasion of our privacy. If you came and asked me for my VIN, I will tell you what I have in my car.
It's visible from the outside of the car.
So you went and followed me.
Is this my time?
You went and followed me to see who drives me.
Can I reclaim my time?
And write down their VIN number. You interrupted me. You're attacking me. You watched me go to see who drives me, writing down their VIN number so you could find out what they have. That seems a
No,
little creepy.
just to expose the hypocrisy. Much like, for example,
Expose
the
the
fact
hypocrisy.
that you get
Come and
paid,
ask
you
me
get
about my
you
car.
get a paycheck, but
Come
you
and-
walk by, you get a
I'm
paycheck.
donating my paycheck, sir, and I would happily
How about
be
your
on
staff?
legislation
What do you say to them?
not to give
What do you
back.
say to the staff? What do you
I
say to the TSA workers? What do you say to the air traffic controllers? What
What
do you
I
say
am
to the
saying
military?
to you is
What do you
this
say
is
to
a
the Capitol
Republican
Police?
shutdown, my friend. You are in control of the White House. You are in control of the House, and you are in control of the Senate.
Does it
And
take
if you
60
went
votes?
home
Does
to
it
a
take 60
food bank
votes?
instead of going to Mar-a-Lago
Does it
to
take 60
eat
votes?
at a gold-plated dinner while people are starving, you might see and hear your constituents, sir. You are blind to the suffering of your people.
Does it take 60 votes?
You listening and coming to the table
So
to
it
have a
does take
discussion.
60 votes.
You want to have this, come talk to me in private, sir.
Okay. So it does take 60 votes, for the record, just so that we're clear on the reporting, so that there's no misinformation. It does take, back to you, Mr. Edwards.
Well, if Senator Moreno would be open perhaps to a couple of questions, just to clarify the record, because we had a bit of Washington play acting just a moment ago. Senator Moreno, is it accurate that you and virtually every other Republican have voted 14 times to reopen the government?
We voted 14 times to end debate so that we could actually vote to open the government, yes.
And is it accurate that Senator Rosen and virtually every other Democrat has voted 14 times to keep the government closed?
Yes, her colleague from Nevada has bravely fought Chuck Schumer and has voted to open the government. So has John Fetterman and Angus King from Maine. So I applaud 3 Democrats for actually having the decency, the humanity to be able to pay government workers, pay our military, provide Head Start, provide SNAP benefits.
And is it accurate that Democrat Senator John Fetterman has repeatedly said this is a Democrat shutdown caused by Chuck Schumer and the Democrats?
Yeah, and I find it ironic that my Democrat colleagues will go to lobbyist dinners tonight, which they get fed steak, while people in their own constituents in their own states will not know where to get money to buy their groceries, or in the case of SNAP recipients, not be able to buy basic goods.
Is it also accurate that during the Biden presidency, 13 times Republicans worked with Democrats to pass a clean continuing resolution?
You would know better, Chairman, but I don't think there's ever been a time in U.S. history where a clean continuing resolution has been voted down by either party.
And is it accurate as well that CNN has fact-checked multiple Democrats who've insisted this is not a clean CR, and CNN, sometimes called the Clinton News Network, sometimes called the Communist News Network, has fact-checked the Democrats and said, no, this is in fact a clean CR that your party is voting against?
Yes, although I do wonder whether they've actually read the legislation, because that evidently is something that's optional. But I would assume if they have read it or took the time to read it, they'd realize it's their budget that they passed, and they're blocking this through a procedural technicality that prohibits us from actually taking a vote to reopen the government.
The record will reflect that every one of the questions we just engaged in is objectively true, and it says something that not a single Democrat is here to contest it, that their approach to this is instead to scream and yell while consistently voting to keep the government shut down and to deny pay to thousands of federal workers, including within this committee's jurisdiction, some 50,000 TSA agents who are going to work right now. They missed their last paycheck. They're not being paid, including some 14,000 air traffic controllers who are going to work right now. They're not being paid. And the consequence, we are seeing delays at airports all across the country. We are seeing thousands of delays. We are seeing thousands of flight cancellations. We are seeing ground stops in major airports. And I would note one senior Democrat aide told Politico this shutdown will continue until planes start falling from the sky. For a committee with jurisdiction over aviation safety, that is a horrifying statement. And yet, for our Democrat colleagues, apparently they agree with those sentiments.